WOCA.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. How coordinated are you? How coordinated were you when you were a child? I can remember it's kind of, at the age of 60, it still kind of stings a little bit to tell you this, that when I was younger, I was very uncoordinated. And I was reminded of that all the time by my friends. I just was not. And I probably am still not in the truest sense. And it explains why, even though I'm 6'6" tall, I'm really no good at basketball. I can't even get a crumpled up piece of paper into the waste paper basket in the corner in our office.
Well, that's not your passion, though. Not your
Developmental coordination disorder is probably more serious than what I'm talking about, I'm guessing. It is the topic that we will be discussing right now. It is abbreviated to its three letters, DCD, Developmental Coordination Disorder, according to my notes. Not that I would know this without the notes, but with the notes, I can tell you that it is a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects 1 in every 20 children, and that children with this problem have problems with motor coordination that makes it very difficult to just play, to write, to eat, to have difficulty doing other normal things like getting dressed, etc. Dr. John Cairney is on the phone. He is the McMaster Family Medicine Professor in Child Health Research. He is a professor in the Departments of Family Medicine, Psychiatry, and Behavioral Neurosciences and Kinesiology, I'm probably saying that wrong, at McMaster University, and he's written a book about this topic. It's called Developmental Coordination Disorder and Its Consequences. Doctor, you already know I'm uncoordinated and that I can't pronounce Kinesiology, whatever it's called. Kinesiology. Good morning, Dr. John Cairney. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, Larry. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. So what I was explaining, of course, you wouldn't know me, so there's really no way of knowing this, but I'm guessing that what normal people go through as awkward adolescence or whatever, it's not the same thing as this, or could it be?
It could be. I think there's a period of time in normal growth and development, we usually refer to it as the adolescent growth spurt, where all of a sudden things change quite rapidly. You get taller, your feet get bigger, the proportion of your legs to the rest of your body changes, and you feel clumsy and awkward. And I think most of the listeners would have experienced that, particularly boys when they go through a pretty rapid growth spurt. But what we're talking about actually starts much earlier. We think it's present really from birth. And these are kids that don't just experience a period of time of physical awkwardness. They're physically awkward or clumsy really throughout their entire lives.
Wow. And so let's see, is this something that we recently discovered that can be addressed? And I guess that's the important question. Can it be addressed?
Right. Well, I'll answer the first question too. It's not. In some ways, the term DCD, Developmental Coordination Disorder, is relatively new, and I suspect there's quite a lot of people actually in the U.S. who would be unfamiliar with that term because it's something that's been adopted in many other countries. And it's been sort of slow to adopt in the United States. But there is something called the American Psychiatric Association. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and it's what psychiatrists use to diagnose a variety of different mental health and neurological problems, and DCD is in that. And I think that kind of recognition now has opened it up and made it much more in the public mind. But in terms of what we can do about it, I mean, there's no cure for DCD, so there's no simple solution. There's no surgery or medication that's going to make the problems go away. But there are lots of things that can be done, and we think one of the most important things that can be done is just simply being aware of what the problem is and what it means to the child or to the adolescent with it. So what I mean specifically by that is sometimes kids who are physically awkward or kids with DCD often get mislabeled as being lazy or unmotivated, or they need to try harder, and those are actually the wrong things, of course, with a child.
Oh,
with
really?
DCD.
So it looks like laziness.
It could. It's one of those things where you might think the child is not paying enough attention. You might think there's a low level of motivation to participate. But really what it is they just don't like doing things that they're not good at, and sometimes it makes them feel very embarrassed. And I think you described that in your own situation. You got a little bit of teasing, and some kids get bullied with this as well, too. It makes you stand out, and that's never a good thing for children, right?
Is fighting against it a therapy in a way? In other words, because I can remember as a kid, saying, okay, well, I am not going to, nobody's going to make fun of this again. I'm going out there and I'm going to practice whatever I need to practice. So I'll practice shooting baskets, or I'll practice, whatever.
Yeah.
Is that therapeutic in a way, or am I not describing what would be therapeutic for this specific condition?
It could be, and I think one of the challenges is it's going to depend on the child, right? But for it's certainly the case that for kids with DCD, they're going to take longer to learn certain kinds of skills, like tying shoelaces or riding a bike. But if they're really, really motivated and they have the right kind of support, and people to instruct them along the way in how to compensate for the problems that they have, then they can do those things. And obviously, if they're successful at it, they have an enormous sense of confidence and competence that actually translates into other positive things in their lives. So what I would say, though, is this is not something that you use the basketball free throw example. This is not something that you can just sort of put a basketball in the hands of a child with DCD and say, okay, now do 100 shots, and by 99 you're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. These are kids that will find it very, very difficult, and in some cases impossible to do certain kinds of motor skills. So part of the challenge for us is finding what they can do and supporting them in doing that so that they feel that sense of competence that kids do when they achieve something.
And sometimes parents don't know how to deal with this, and they'll just fluff it off, and they'll say, "Oh, he or she is just having growing pains," and then the parents leave it at that.
And I think it's really tough. Absolutely right. And I think it's really tough when it's the only child in the family that may be experiencing these problems. I mean, we do have some evidence that shows it tends to run in families, so there's a genetic component. But what we do see with some families is, it might be the second or third child. They have DCD, brother, sister's really good at sports, they're not, and parents are looking at them and saying, okay, well, what's going on here? Maybe we need to push harder. Maybe we need to push this child into sports, and really, because the motivation isn't there. And as I said earlier, that's where the problems start, because, of course, it's not a motivational issue, it's a neuromuscular issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a psychiatric question, since you do have psychiatry in your credentials here. I've often wondered if a child especially is, or adolescent I should say, is somehow comforted knowing that it's in other words, knowing that it's an identifiable condition. In other words, oh gosh, okay, so that's the reason I can't do that. Like with ADD or ADHD, all those things. Like before we had those letters that we could throw around, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm just lazy, or I'm just stupid, or I'm just, and now, oh my gosh, there's a condition that doctors have recognized. To me, that would be enlightening and make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're 100% right on that. I think there are some things where we worry. We talk about labeling, right? And we say we're worried about labeling a child and what it means for that child growing up. But I think this is one of those examples where the label does exactly what you just said. It opens up a world of awareness, and we say, okay, now we know what this is. We were so frustrated by it. Now we understand what it is. Now we can work on a solution to the problem that's going to be beneficial to the child and to everybody. And so I think this is one of those examples where, again, you're 100% right. Let's get the diagnosis out there. Let's use it more often. Let's make sure we're appropriately identifying children when they need to be, and let's provide the supports and services that are required so they can succeed.
Are teachers more aware of this than parents, because the children seem to be with teachers for more hours in the day than they are actually with their parents?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like the ADHD example that you gave. If we go in, and we've certainly done this work, if we go in and we talk to teachers about what to look for, they will immediately say, oh, I have children, like I've seen that child before, I know that child's in my class right now. But if they don't exactly, like the label again, if they don't know exactly how to describe it, then it's not really something they understand very well, and they don't know what to do with it. So absolutely, teachers will see it. They often see it in things like they might view the student as being untidy or a little bit slow to get ready for recess. recess. Often these children have problems with handwriting, and so the handwriting, when children have to print, becomes a major issue. Or even using fingers when you cut things out in art class and things like that. Really, these kids struggle with that. And then physical education class, forget about it. These kids really, really struggle with phys ed. They often try to avoid it as much as possible. So there are signs, and teachers are aware of these, but they often don't see it as a disorder. They don't see it as something specific. They just see it as a behavioral part of the child rather than something specific.
All right. Dr. John Cairney, we need to take a little break, but we'll be right back. If you are listening and you're not really sure what developmental coordination disorder looks like, or any of the other things, and we haven't even talked about something called FAST, P-H-A-S-T.
Right.
We'll find out what that is when we come back. There is a book that'll give you all of the answers to the questions, but you are welcome to call in if you have some questions right now. The interview will continue in just a bit. We've got about 12 minutes left when we come back. The book is Developmental Coordination Disorder and Its Consequences. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. For today, we'll see clouds and intervals of sunshine across the region, and there can be a shower and heavy thunderstorm or two around, especially during the afternoon and evening hours. Watch for flooding downpours, the high 86 to 90. A shower or thunderstorm later tonight, though 74 to 77. For tomorrow, clouds, some sun, a couple of showers and thunderstorms around in the afternoon, the high 84 to 88. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Are you in need of custom screen printing, embroidery, or promotional items? Then look no further and come visit the brand new Legacy Team Sales. LTS is conveniently located off 17th Street next to Armstrong Homes in beautiful Ocala. We offer the best prices and highest quality products for your company, team, school, or nonprofit. Whether looking for screen printed shirts, embroidered polos, or travel team uniforms, you'll be sure to find it at Legacy Team Sales. Come visit our new 27,000 square foot facility. Our friendly and knowledgeable sales staff will assist you in every part of your custom purchase. LTS carries the hottest brands in the industry like Under Armour, Russell, Mizuno, Asics, Badger Sports, Gildan, Pacific, Ogio, and many more. At LTS, screen printing embroidery is done in-house and we guarantee customer satisfaction. Stop by, give us a call, or check us out on the web at shoplts.com. Remember the name, LTS.
If you're anything like I was, the thought of getting older was the last thing on your mind. But here we are. For me, it started slowly. The lack of energy, never being in the mood, and when I was, I could never perform at my best. I tried the pills and other treatments with minimal results, and all but given up on my sex life. Then, I found the doctors at New Male Medical Center. Wow, they made a new male out of me. Feel like I'm 25 again. I have renewed vigor, so much more energy, and no longer worry about my performance. New Male treated me like my situation was one of a kind, with a custom treatment plan that really works. I feel great. They can create one for you too. It does not matter if you suffer from low testosterone, erectile dysfunction, or just want to last longer. New Male will help you.
Call New Male Medical Center today at 352-404-4779. 352-404-4779. That's 352-404-4779. It will change your life. 352-404-4779.
All right, thank you for staying tuned. 12 minutes before 11 o'clock, Dr. John Cairney is on the phone with us. We're talking about his book and the subject of the book, which is Developmental Coordination Disorder and Its Consequences. Doctor, thank you for waiting through the break, first of all. And so we kind of have an overall view of this. Can you describe what it looks like for the listeners who want to know a little bit more, and especially for those who are saying, wait a minute, that sounds like Johnny, or that sounds like Susie.
Yeah. Sounds like me.
It's something, one of those things I've given this talks about DCD in a number of different places, and the number of times somebody comes up to me after the talk and said exactly what you just said. That's my child, or that was my friend growing up, or that was me. It is very common, as you said, 1 in 25%. That's a significant part of the population. It looks a little bit different in every child, and that's one of the things that's tricky about it. But the main thing is that these are children who struggle with either or fine motor or gross motor coordination difficulties. Now, let me be specific what I mean by that. Fine motor would involve things like the use of fingers and hands. So these would be children who would find it difficult to put a straw in a drinking box, would find it difficult to open up lunch boxes and lunch containers, would find it difficult to button their shirts or zip up their pants or tie their shoelaces. So it's, again, not just sport and physical activity, but everyday life skill activities these children would find difficult. Some children have real problems with the big muscle groups in their body. They have problems with climbing, with running, with jumping, with hopping. It's not that they can't do it, it's just that they look very different than other children when they do it, and they tend to fall down and get hurt a lot. So these are kids who could look accident prone as well.
Could this be a precursor to leukemia?
We don't have good evidence about this being a precursor to chronic illnesses in adulthood, other than what we're concerned about, which is the tendency for these kids to be more likely to be overweight and obese, and some of the consequences that come with that. But one of the things that parents would really want to do if they suspect a child might have DCD, obviously, is go to their family physician or go to their physician and make sure that they do a full physical workup on that child, because obviously some of the things that I've been describing could be related to other health conditions. It could be related to very serious neurological conditions or other kinds of problems. So the diagnosis of DCD is only made after you rule out other things that might explain why a child is struggling with motor.
Do you know, when you were talking about the fine motor skills as opposed to the larger muscles, it explains why I remember a young girl who was like this fabulous dancer. She took ballet, and I don't know if she took it and that helped her get over being uncoordinated. But in everything else, it was like when she was in that mindset, she was not uncoordinated. She was anything but uncoordinated. She was a graceful dancer.
Yeah.
And yet she wasn't exactly the most graceful in every other aspect. It was kind of weird. Isn't that strange? So okay, in my notes, there's something called FAST, PHAST. What is that?
We a number of years ago, back in the early 2000s, we started what was then one of the first longitudinal studies of children with DCD. We called it FAST. It was a play on the fat with a PH, which the kids thought was cool in grade 4, but by the time they got to high school, we were not cool anymore. But it stands for Physical Health Activity Study Team, and we didn't tell the kids really, or we didn't tell the kids that we were going in and doing a test to see if they were clumsy. We said we wanted to go in and do tests to see how they were performing and whether or not they were physically active and what they enjoyed. So we followed over 2,000 children in a school district for 7 years, and what we found in that, we identified about 115 children, which is about 4.5%, who looked like they had DCD, and we compared them to the other children in the school. And what we found was, unfortunately, by the end of that study, many of them were very physically inactive, were not playing and not participating in sports or other kinds of active play with their friends. And the rates of overweight and obesity were significantly higher in that group than they were in typically developing children. And that's a concern, obviously.
And that's psychological, right? Because they feel like they're embarrassed to join in on some of the activities, and then they become more sedentary. Am I right?
Yeah, they tend to, absolutely. They tend to, again, most kids want to do what they feel they're good at, and they avoid things that they don't feel they're good at. And that's adults, too, for that matter. And so for these kids, it was choosing things that were more sedentary, reading, watching TV, talking with friends. And that's okay. Those are important activities, but as we all know, physical activity is important too. And if you're not involved in those kinds of things and you're not playing team sport, you don't have the same network of friends, you don't have the same opportunities to develop in ways that typically developing children do. And obviously the obesity and overweight one was a big concern because we know the long-term health consequences of those things. So we were one of the first groups to really make a link between DCD and possibly cardiovascular disease later in life because of this cycle of inactivity.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is interesting. So I guess another psychological question: parents and friends, but parents have a big influence on children. And so if a parent, in a joking way, says, "Gosh, you are so uncoordinated," does that embed in the mind psychologically? Well, I guess I am if Dad says so, and therefore they don't get over it, or like would we? I always feel like we can bless or curse our children by what we say. Like if we say, "Gosh, you're never going to amount to anything," they're going to believe that. Or if you say, "Gosh, you are so smart, you're going to be able to do anything you want." That's kind of like the blessing that we can give. It's without trying to be mystical about it, it's probably a psychological truth about us.
Well, sure. There's an old term that's been around for a while called self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which is the idea that if you believe something, and let's face it, parents, as you say, can have a very positive and/or negative impact on their child's development, as can teachers and others. And if you're constantly told that you're not good at something, then that begins to reinforce. One of the things we haven't talked about with this group, which I think is really important, is that these are kids. When we do studies, and we're not the only group that's done this, when we look at their IQ, these kids are absolutely in the normal IQ range, and in some instances actually a little high on IQ. And so we have to remember these are smart, bright young children who can't do motor activities. That is an important piece of it, because if it has a negative impact on their self-esteem, it's because of the motor piece. It's not because of their abilities cognitively. It's not because of their intelligence. And so, circling back to what you said, you'd be worried about sending the wrong message to children for sure. But we also realize that these kids are pretty gifted in other ways. Motor just isn't where it's at, but in other domains they're actually very gifted, and they can be quite smart. In fact, a lot of them end up in universities, and colleagues of mine, I can tell you the number of...
And doesn't that sound true? I mean, doesn't that ring true? I mean, we all know those kids. We know the kids that, they were like super smart, and yet they weren't exactly the athletes in the school. Not to say that the athletes weren't smart. But we all know those kids. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the only thing we have to be careful of, and this is the one thing that I really stress, is that it's more than athletics. I mean, it's like I said, if you think back to the description of these are kids that struggle with everyday activities. Even, somebody once came out, he was a professor in medical school, and he came up to me after a talk, and he said, for sure I had DCD when I was a kid. We didn't know what it was. And he went to shake my hand, and he missed it entirely, right?
Oh.
Something simple like that, little thing like that, sets him apart from other people. Every time he moves and does something, it's a little bit unusual, and that can have a negative cumulative impact for people, right?
Okay, so I'm putting up a sign in my office right by the trash can that says, "Don't make fun of the paper on the floor. Larry has DCD."
Yeah.
He's not able to get... All right.
The photo on your book is very, very effective. You just want to hug him. Do the children try to shy away from physical contact?
Oh, I see the cover. Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily. I wouldn't say physical contact, but definitely they often obviously want to be away from situations where there are other children. They often what we worry most with these kids is that they end up becoming quite isolated. They want to go off on their own and do their own thing because it's safer for them. I had colleagues once who did this. They wanted to do an observational study, if you can imagine this. So they went on a playground in a daycare center in an elementary school, and they knew who these kids were, and they wanted to see what they were doing at recess. And their finding was they couldn't tell you what they were doing at recess because they were never out for recess. They were always in the school cleaning the chalkboard brushes, or doing something else, anything to avoid being out with their peers where difficulties could be noticed.
The little boy on the cover looks like that thing they always tell you to do: rub your head and pat your belly, and then now switch. Yeah.
But you just want to hug him.
Yeah.
Looks like he wants to hug.
All right. So the book. I'm guessing the book will answer any questions that we might have. Does it give us solutions to the problem?
There's definitely chapters in there that talk about things that can be done. It also puts you in. It also has places where you can go. A lot of online sources that you can go to that there's helpful information. We also have a lab. We have a website. It's www.inchlab, inchlab.ca, and there's information about the disorder and where parents can get information and things that they can take with them when they consult their family doctor. And they really, really do have to go to their family doctors if they feel that this is a concern.
Okay. .ca. Are you in Canada?
Yeah, we're Canada. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, Doctor, for being on the air with us today. The book, again, Developmental Coordination Disorder and Its Consequences. This should be in every school. Every nurse, every teacher, everybody should have this, because especially in a school, because you're going to see this. You're going to see these kids, and it's going to give you some tools that'll help you with those children. Dr. John Cairney, thank you so much. That was a great conversation.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll take a little break. We'll be right back.